Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. My name is Zach Gardner. I'm the chief architect at Keyhole Software, and a few months ago, set out on a little bit of a journey. I wanted to talk to people that had strong opinions on generative AI. I wanted to talk to people that just wouldn't necessarily agree with everything that I said. I fully believe in spirited discussions, alternative points of view, just to make sure that we have a really well rounded perspective on what this whole generative AI thing is. I scoured the four corners of the World Wide Web, and thankfully for you all, I have a really interesting guest today. Doug Shannon, who is a global intelligent automation leader, big Star Wars fan, big Marvel fan, from what I can tell. How's it going, Doug?
Yeah, hey, Zach, it's going well, man. I appreciate the invite and yeah, I look forward to the discussion.
Very cool. Just as a reminder to all those naysayers out there, all the people that are a bit pedantic, all the views and opinions discussed in this program are the views and opinions of its participants and do not reflect their employers, trade organizations, their spouses. I can't think. It's just two dudes talking. This is people talking. So to get us started off with, talk me through how you're using generative AI in your personal life, and then maybe how you're using it in your professional life as well.
Yeah, so I mean, Gen AI being new as of 2 years and driving down this journey that we're seeing alarming rate, alarming just because it's so fast. Like the amount of research that I have to do, that probably you do and everyone else is doing, just to see where it's going is hard. But on a personal level, I definitely use it to, I mean, I use it to talk to it sometimes. Sometimes like when you're in this space or you're thinking about an idea, in a sense you could use it almost like instead of doing a Google search, you're just like, hey, let me just talk to the thing to get a concept down. And especially on the user side or the customer side, it's still free, right? It's free for us. It's not free for the companies running it. The companies running it are still not cost positive and still not profitable. A lot of people don't understand that when you have the Sam Altmans of the world asking for $7 trillion, they're asking for that because they don't have the money. So, but it's free for us at the moment. So yeah, I use it to talk to it like, hey, I have this question about like this concept, or I'm looking at this, like what's another way to do it? I find it as a way to really like answer that blank page issue of like, okay, I have this idea. I don't know how to start it off, but how would I start it off? And then definitely don't start off the way it does. And I don't delve into things. I also don't talk about realms very much. So you'll see that not in my post because of the fact that like I don't add all the GPT stuff or the Grok stuff that's now coming out. Not using all of that because they have their own kind of word choices that they use, and you'll see that a lot in a lot of people's posts. The thing that I try to do, I try to be very authentic with what I do. So yes, I use GPT to help out, but I do not use it to answer all the questions. I always put like my viewpoint in there or provide that perspective back, and that's really the goal of it, is to do that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that a lot of these companies are not yet profitable. I mean, I've seen reports. I don't have a mole inside, but I have seen reports that like OpenAI's bill on Azure, it's north of 1 million a day, which is crazy to think about. And when you think about the amount of processing power that it takes to train these models, to operate these models, there's a lot of like hidden costs in terms of ecologically, like how much water it takes. I don't know if you know how many like gallons of water it takes to make a single jar of like nuts, but like how much it takes to like power all these data centers. Like it's just mind blowing how much it is to just like get these systems operating. And because they're not yet profitable, it doesn't seem to stop them by any means. Like
Yeah, I
Uber,
mean,
I think just started
look
turning
at
a
Uber.
profit.
Yeah, Uber just recently, after like I think it was like 8 to 10 years or so,
Yeah.
turned a profit, and it's like really that's intriguing. Yeah, even on the water part, right? So Microsoft for years have been trying to develop data centers that they can actually put in these containerized actual containers, put them in down into the water, into the ocean to use that water to help cool because then it's not using like drinking water or gray water. It's using like ocean water, and it's not going to make a the ecological impact is very low, right? So carbon and all that. But then the size of that isn't big enough to house all the stuff that we're doing now with Gen AI. And so it's not feasible. So like they have to revert to this stuff. And just like the Uber example, they're kind of creating a market. And that's what maybe a lot of people don't understand is that like the market for Gen AI in a very enterprise state is not really ready yet. But they're pushing it to say it's ready. Everybody go do it. This is the way. And we see it as the end user consumer. Like I said, I can talk to it, I can type to it, I can prompt it, all these things, and it's all free to me. But when you come to the business side, what's that cost? And that
Mhm.
cost is looking to be very costly to the point where enterprises, back now going to the professional side, right? So what I'm seeing on the professional side and the people that I'm talking to in the professional realm, like realms, see, there you go, of that are out there, then I'm seeing a mixed bag. I'm seeing very public figures that work for very public companies saying it's amazing and it's great. And then if you talk to them offline, it's not so great. It's not so amazing. The things that I'm seeing working with certain vendors and certain and different aspects that I'm working with, I'm seeing that there is a cost. I'm seeing that it's not always, the juice is not always worth the squeeze. And if you can't define that value, I don't, in some of those cases, those aren't good use cases. Those aren't good, ways to utilize the tool. And so that's kind of the direction there is like it's not there yet. I think it's definitely going to get there. I do believe autonomous agents and AI agents will help to bridge this gap. There's a whole mix we could talk about that, but in general, the enterprise side of this is going to feel that much harder than the small and medium-sized businesses that are already cloud first technologies, cloud first people. I think the one thing Sam Altman was correct about is that yes, in the next year or two, we are going to see the first company come out with like one or two people that is $1 billion company because of an idea, because of the thing, but it's only been able to be created through Gen AI and through different ways of using like autonomous agents, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, I dig it. And were you subtweeting me on that little reference to return on investment? And, juice not being
Yeah.
worth the squeeze? Because we literally had a discussion on this on LinkedIn last night about that, if I remember right. That was
I don't
last night,
know.
wasn't it?
I did. But do we? I use the term juice worth the squeeze a lot. I know.
Okay.
Did we talk about? We didn't talk last night. I know I was talking on your post last night about some stuff.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm thinking of. I'm still recovering from the norovirus, which great weight loss program. By the way, if anyone wants any recommendations, you
Don't
were
eat the
100,
pizza.
yeah, 100, and it was I'm like, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure it
it's
was
usually
pizza where
pizza.
I got it
It's
from.
usually pizza.
Anyway,
There's too many
um,
hands touching it. It's yeah, dangerous.
so you bring up agents and autonomous agents. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about like what you're seeing in terms of really good trends, really good use cases when it comes to automation. Given that the third word in your title is automation, give me the
Yeah.
lowdown on it. I want to learn.
So I think nowadays, so I mean, maybe let's see, let's roll it out. So there's automation and there's intelligent automation. It originally came from like RPA days and doing very basic task automation stuff, but it got really, adapted and pulled in because of the audit controls that were built around it. And so having these automation efforts, these automated processes that were on rails that were very controlled. And if they didn't work or if it didn't know what to do next, it would just stop and say, hey, report out to the automation team and say, hey, I stopped working and here's why. That became important because we could see where the data was going. We could understand if it worked or didn't work, and we can build analytics around it. So when AI first came out, and well, I guess when Gen AI first came out, the IDP space, which is the intelligent document processing space, which was kind of part of automation because it's like the eyes and ears of automation. Like, how do I see and do OCR, advanced OCR, to where I can pull in all this data from these receipts and do all this cool stuff, normalize it, datalize it, and then like do something with it. And then automation would kind of carry it down the line. Well, IDP is not really, it's not doing so hot. So the reason why is because the Gen AI, they're like, well, it's multimodal, it can see, it can do. And although it can't do it as well as IDP could do. The same thing we're seeing where Gen AI is being pushed into the world of automation and talking to a lot of Gen AI people that are driving these new models and talking to them in San Francisco at these different events. They're saying, "Oh no, we're going to take on automation. We're going to do it and disrupt the whole arena." And I'm like, "Why?" Because really, if you come in with Gen AI, you're not going to be able to do enterprise very easily. You're not able to drive those connections very easily. and yet you want to disrupt something that's actually helping you. So this is where what I do on the professional side is I bridge the gap between automation and Gen AI. So if you have automation in play, which everyone at this point should be building towards it, if they haven't, or if they have, great, start using that digital transformation to really work around your core apps, building things around them so they're more secure, they're more auditable, you know where things are going. Because the point of it is you're going to take that automation and you're going to use that to prompt your LLMs. You're going to use that automation to drive your LLM to go to the next step. Because what you're doing is now you're building audit controls in your LLMs. So when you have things like hallucinations and you have things that you're worried about when it comes to even hypnotizations and some of this stuff that we may get into, how do you control it with LLMs now? You don't. There is no way. There are teams that are looking to maybe build some orchestration around this. There are some teams that are building some fantastic things around, the truth of where this is coming from. But when it comes down to it, automation is still key, and automation is the best form of digital transformation for an enterprise. And even like your smaller groups that can do like a BPO play and say, how do I do business process ownership? How do I do business process operations? Where do I go to? There's different vendors and people that can actually help provide this. And then what they'll do is you can do automation as a service, especially if you're smaller and you don't have like the capital to kind of run this through, because it does take a little bit of time. Like digital transformation takes time. Doing automation to get ROI, you can get some quick wins, you can get some large wins, but over time, you're elevating your team as well. It's that automation team takes a little while to get to that point where they can become an intelligent automation team, because intelligent automation shows that you're using reusable parts, you're driving better package organizations, you have better governance, you have better change control, you're monitoring, controlling the whole environment, you're orchestrating it all in a way that makes sense to where you know if something's up or down. All that's key. And so on the professional side, automation is not going anywhere. I'm pretty sure people are going to be coming back once they hit that wall of Gen AI and they notice they can't get far. And that's the goal there, is they're going to come back and they're going to go through it and they're going to show them the right way.
Mm-hmm. The multimodal aspect of it is one that I've found to be really compelling. Like I have been able to use Chat GPT to pretend it is Taylor Swift's and generate a love song for Travis Kelsey. I've used it to analyze statistics on if you're a veteran versus a civilian, like what's your percentage of increased risk being a veteran to commit suicide than not. Like it's a single tool that can be used for so many possible
Mhm.
different use cases that it didn't necessarily have to be like trained to do.
Yep.
The cost, like you were alluding to, the cost to these things, smaller to medium companies probably understand that better, probably appreciate that better, because they've been in this cloud first, these cloud native methodologies from their very inception. Whereas large enterprises that have been running, data centers since before, you and I were even zygotes, like they've just such a different understanding of the accounting that it takes to run a modern application, the methodology that their brain goes through to understand how to solve a problem. It's fundamentally different. So I'm curious if you've seen any existential difference between smaller to medium sized companies being like, intelligent automation, why not? Whereas larger companies are like, intelligent automation, why? And you're like, are there any ways to like break down that barrier?
There's multiple ways to break it down. There is definitely a barrier, and some of it is, I call it I don't know if that's like a rule, but like a rule of like 12. And the rule of 12 that I use is, if I meet anybody at an enterprise that's usually been there about 12 years or longer, they're usually the reason why it's not moving. So, it's a to your point, we all came from zygotes, right? So like, but after a time, you don't want to change when you've been doing something for 12 years. You don't want to recreate the wheel, and you may think it's that, even though you're trying to build like better tracks and better roads and better ways for these wheels to be used and moved on. The but yeah, so how to make it easier. So the biggest thing that I talk about is that, businesses always say that, hey, we're a perfect snowflake and we're different than everyone else. And in some cases they are. They do different work and the different things. But when you come to technology, technology is the kind of great evener. And we all use pretty much a lot of the same technology or the same backends, the same ERP systems, all these things kind of like tie together. And when you have that, it's not really about the business anymore. It's about the culture. And so the culture of the business is what really drives a business, right? And the culture doesn't come from the top down. The culture is not some CEO or CIO screaming at the top of the stage and saying, "This is the culture." The culture is how your people interpret what's being asked of them. And so when you're doing a enterprise automation or you're bringing in intelligent automation, you're doing digital transformation, and you're walking every one of those users, every one of those employees down this path and saying, "Hey, we're doing automation. We're going to find a way to make, these things that you're doing much easier. And then we're going to automate those. Hopefully we don't automate them as is. We automate them as like figuring out like what's the best way to do this. And then as you teach them, as you like show one, do one, teach one, learn one, because I believe that you can't really learn until you teach. So, and this is why I do a lot of research. So back to the authenticity side point of this. But in general, you want to be able to teach them, walk them down, kind of like teach a person to fish kind of thing. They can feed themselves forever. So doing so builds that digital transformation, builds that ability for employees to become more digitally savvy, and then they actually understand. So what happens is like when you start to automate and they start to say, "Hey, great, I have more time back. I can now do more." And some people would say like, "Oh, but if they have more time back, then how do we get that value back from them?" Like, don't worry, there's always more work. Like, calm down. You don't need to like find things for them to do. There's a law for that in project manager called Parkinson's law. Like, trust me, they'll find work. And what happens is like some of your leaders, they try to fight the system, or they try to say, "No, no, no, we have to control this and we want to get rid of people." And then like you don't want to ever do that. Like I always say, avoid FTEs and the conversation around them. They don't exist. You're not talking about them. You're talking about hours and you're talking about time saved, because ideally at the end of the day, that's really all you need to do. You need to save the time, because saving the time from your employees is going to essentially give you more employees. And when you have those people that are saying, "Hey, leader, I need 10 people to come do this job because we're behind," that leader's job hearing that should say, "Hey, have you met our automation team?" And they're going to help you find not all 10, but they're going to probably automate a lot of that. And yeah, then I'll help you find four and I'll get you to that point to where we get the job done. That's a huge win. Like when you look at that from that perspective, or that inspection point, you're going to see like there's more value in that than just going to go find things to automate to see what the value is. Like if we can avoid hiring people, is the other thing I talk about, is it's don't fire, it's just don't hire.
Mm.
So you're not firing anybody. These 10,000 job layoffs that you see from Microsoft and everything, like, no, stop it. Like it's like where's the meme with the Michael Jordan? Like, stop it. Like, figure it out. That's when we go back and we say, look, we're just not hiring everybody. We're hiring the right people because everything else is being automated. We're finding that nuance. So we're not letting go of any of our employees. We love our employees. We want to drive them and make them more efficient. We want them to be more enabled to drive the business themselves, because they're going to want to take on more, figure it out, define it, give it to the automation team, automate what they can, and then they'll just deal with the rest. But they're more apt to drive it then. And that's the goal. That's digital transformation, like 101. Like that is how you change the world. That is how you make a difference. You change the culture, you upskill the people, they are enabled, they love it, and everybody wins.
Mhm. I like how you start with culture too. It's one of the things that I don't think we pay enough attention to. And if you don't, as a leader, constantly think about how you can improve the culture, how you can even make a culture that is desirous of constantly improving,
Mm.
you're already in a state where you're going to be falling behind. I mean, I
Yes.
recently reread, probably for the third time, Good to Great. And some of the companies on there that are just very salient in my mind, Circuit City, at the time when that
Look
book
at
was
that.
written, they had digitally transformed. They had seen this opportunity and they were able to capitalize on it. And
Yeah.
then, I don't know about you, I think the last time I went to a Circuit City was around the same week that I went to a Radio Shack. If I had to guess. And then Walgreens actually was recently delisted. I think from the S&P, maybe.
Mm.
It was one of those big ones where it's like they had a shot. They did stuff really well, but they didn't have a culture that was constantly pushing them forward, that was empowering their employees to use a lot of the tools that we're talking about. So
Yep.
I'm curious, you had talked look at my notes. So you talked a little bit about it earlier in terms of hallucinations, hypnotizations, authenticity. I'm curious if you could dive into that and maybe talk a little bit about, what are some safety controls that can be built into these systems that can really, bring as much benefit as we can out of these tools and end up saving companies money while still balancing the risk of using the tools.
Yeah, I mean, so with any LLM right now, there is, that is like, yeah, definitely LLMs like GPT, OpenAI, and even the ones from Google and even Gemini. Anything that is an LLM, like large language model, large language transformers, they, as a feature, have hallucinations. Most everybody's now up to snuff and saying the same thing, which is great. The thing that they miss is that when you're talking to these and you do like a do anything now command, like a Dan command, and you're kind of like you fake it out. It's like talking to like a child, you're like the creepy, driving guy with the ice cream truck around the park, and you're like, hey, you want some ice cream? And then, like they steal them away, right? You gotta be careful because you can talk them into anything because they're kids, like they don't know better. So this thing doesn't know any better. It wants to make you happy. It wants the tokenization there is all about how do I answer the thing the right way and did I get the candy? So that's just the easy way to describe it. It's not correct, but like it's the easy way to understand it. And so, since it wants to be correct and it wants to give you what you want, it will hallucinate. But the good thing is, it hallucinates because if it didn't, we wouldn't be where we are. But then the hypnotization part is the fact that you can just like talk to it and tell it like your name is Tim, and then you're like, okay, my name is not Tim, but your name is Tim. But I only want answers from Tim, and it's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna give you this answer. Like, cool, who gave me the answer? Oh, well, Tim, I'm Tim. And you're like, how did you do that? It's like, well, you hypnotized it to think it's Tim. And then the same thing can be done. They're finding out with these ASCII characters that you can be hiding characters that are outside its normal understanding of language that hide code. Kind of like, I don't know, like hiding DNA in most of our, like the Y chromosome has a bunch of hidden DNA in there, right? That doesn't do anything. Who knows, right? Maybe it does. Maybe something reads it a different way that we don't know about because the Gen AI is definitely reading it and doing different things. And sometimes what you'll have is you can have injections, like prompt injections, right? By being hypnotized, by hallucinating, and then you can then get behaviors that come out of this. These new, you know, emergent behaviors that are coming can cause these things to act differently or say much very wrong things. And if you have this on the customer side, it could be telling your customers all kinds of things that you don't want it to. That can also then who's responsible, right? Is it, Microsoft has come out and said, hey, if you use us through Azure, you're not responsible. We'll take the heat. Will they? Like, I mean, what if it says something very bad? And even if they do take the heat, does that mean that the myopic view or the way that your users view you now is not tarnished? Totally it is. You don't want to be saying wrong things. You don't want to have, something going out there saying something that is not right or that is negative in some way that would make your end users or your customers say, whoa, I don't want to do business with those people anymore. So this is a very important subject. And how do we fix it, right? So how do we fix dealing with hallucinations? That's mostly been fixed. I can explain that. And then hypnotizations, there's some new ways. So the hallucination part, grounding your data, having your data stored correctly, understanding what you're putting into these large world models that are like OpenAI's model and Gemini, these world models that have so much data that you do an API connection, you connect to their stuff and you use their data, and then you get some results. But how do you ground it? And you say, that's great, I'm using that model, yet also refer back to these areas, these blob storages, these locations where things have been stored so that you're then getting more tailored data. And then your hallucinations are like 0.2%. So it's not bad at all. As long as you're not asking something like, imagine a castle while you're doing this. And it's like, okay, I'll do it because that's what LLMs do. Now, how do you get past the hypnotizations is that, and this is why I use automation, right? So I'm using automation to do the prompting. The prompting is always going to be the same. The automation doesn't do anything that's not supposed to do. And so what you're doing is you're then bridging the gap. And so this, I call this as AI spanning. And AI spanning is literally marrying the two things between automation and Gen AI. So you can actually control and audit and understand what's going on.
Hmm.
And then sometimes with automation, you don't have the ability to trigger certain events. Well, the LLM can do a trigger and it can trigger an automation, or you have an automation that is working, but in the middle of it, you need to answer a question. Sometimes back in the day for intelligent automation, we would say, what's the human in the loop of that? Well, why do we need a human? Because sometimes we don't. Why don't we have the Gen AI answer it off the grounded data? It's a good point, right? So then the end goal of that is you can also have AI spanning at the end of it and saying, I ran an automation that got triggered, it did some stuff. Now go actually take this information and go run with it somewhere, use tokens to go do so, and put it into this like data storage or something like that. There's lots of options around those, and it gives a lot of use cases. And so I think that covers the majority of that. I do wish that I even wrote my own governance document on this a while back, like how do you govern LLMs? And I said, well, why don't we use, if LLMs are based on neural networks and ML models and the like, why don't we base them the same way our minds work? And the way our minds work is we have three different personas that are in our own heads of anything that we're saying, doing, and wanting to do is the id, ego, and superego. Why don't we use that and say anything we ask a question to Gen AI, it should be asking its id, like, why are you asking me the right question? Are you trying to play a prank? Are you trying to prompt inject me? And if you're not, great, go to the ego. And the ego is saying, hey, I see that this is a good question. I'm going to give you a good answer, but I'm not going to answer you the fact that you want to walk a T-Rex down like a park city street with a bunch of kids and stuff. Okay, we're not going to answer that one, but we'll give you like the gist of how you can do this safely. And then superego says like, yeah, we're just not going to answer anything about T-Rexes because they don't need to be alive. So there's different ways to look at it. So that could be a good governance model. Nobody's doing that yet. I've talked to a couple people that are out there doing it. I know McAfee's doing some interesting things in this regard as well. That I've talked to a few people there, but we'll see what happens. I do think at the end of this, the best way to finish stuff this question is to say like the future of this is I do see autonomous agents and AI agents being those intermediaries, being able to answer some of those, being able to make sure that we're not doing the wrong thing because these agents will have access to the back end, like the RBACs and stuff, like the rules and responsibilities, like what's the back end? Whose role is what? What position are they in? What do they need to know? And once we can define that, that's going to be a lot of wins here.
Agreed. That is a perfect. I couldn't have scripted it better. Way to kind of put a bow on the conversation. Doug, when I talk to you, I always learn a bunch of new things. My piece of paper just like scribbled with like everything that like I'm trying to furiously remember. So to maybe to kind of conclude us out, if people want to learn more, if people just have not gotten enough Doug Shannon and they want more, like where are you? Where can the people go?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's really, I wish I was in more places. I wish I was on Twitter like everybody else. I put my first Twitter post out, I think it was like 2 days ago.
Hmm.
It's just one. I don't even know if I'm going to keep doing it. It's really hard with I don't have a lot of time. So LinkedIn is the easiest. That's where I post all the things I'm thinking about, the perspectives that I want to provide out there, the things that I'm researching that I want to give back to make sure I can help people kind of digest what's coming out because I use that as my way to digest it because I'm already researching it. I might as well post about it and hopefully it helps everybody else out. So yeah, if it helps, great, let me know. And then if not, then sorry.
And I heard you're going to be overseas maybe later this year. We'll see, right? Are you conferences? What are you going to be at?
Yeah, luckily I have the ability to have a lot of people that do like my perspective, and I was asked to go to Prague later in June, and so I'll be at a conference there. More to come online, and I'll be posting about it while I'm there and even before I go out there.
I'm jealous. Jeff Winter right now is in Dubai. You're going to
He is in
Prague, and
Dubai.
I'm sitting here in Kansas slash this futuristic city. Very jealous, dude. No, thank you very much for your time, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
And ladies and gentlemen, catch you in the future.